Welcome to the show, Stacy.
Thank you.
Congratulations on 5 years sober. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a long journey and I really worked hard on where I became and where I am now.
So today's January 3rd of 2024. So what was going on for you January 2nd, 5 years ago?
So 5 years ago in January 2nd, I actually was at a shelter and I had mishapped and I relapsed. And I also had my daughter at that time. She was about 4 months and I relapsed. So I had to get into treatment. So I went to a detox. And my goal was to, stay sober at the time when I had my daughter, but mishaps happened. So I ended up relapsing and I went to a detox. And when I entered this detox, I did it on my own behalf because I knew that I was in danger of my own health. So when I did that, I didn't think I was gonna make it this far actually because addiction is very, very addictive and it's a trait that runs in your DNA, I think. And I'm trying to break the circle. So when I went into detox, I thought about the process of actually like changing my life and actually getting into out of the shelter into my own apartment, gaining my children back. And when I went to detox, I stayed there for about 7 days, and then I actually went into treatment at a hospital for about 3 months to stabilize myself and make sure that I'm capable and be watched, which I passed the test, thank God. And I knew I was gonna. So I was in Jamaica Plain, and I stayed there for about 4 or 5 months, and I didn't think I was gonna receive my daughter back due to the circumstances of previous mishaps. So I fought tooth and nail to be reunificated her after 30 days to a program. So when I stayed at the hospital in Jamaica Plain, I stayed there. I graduated. They helped me along the way. I had therapists, I had psychiatrists, I had recovery coach, and I also had the department helping me. And at that time, I mean, I knew that I had to change my life because I knew my daughter depended on me and my other children. And at that time, I really didn't have anybody. My family had moved, and I was here myself, doing it by myself, and it was hard to do that. Um, so I went into a program over in an undisclosed location with 12 women and 22 children under 5, and I stayed there for a year and a half. And the only reason the department would allow me to get my children back is if I stayed in a program for long enough. They promised me housing. And when I stayed at this program, I learned a lot. I went to a lot of groups. I went to AA meetings twice a day. I got spiritually connected and I got connected with my spirit and God, however anybody wants to say it, but a God is a God, whatever you choose. But at that time, when I went to these AA meetings, hearing other people's story and relating with them and not knowing, walking into a room full of people that you don't know and actually feeling that love and connection that you have, knowing that these people are struggling with the same addiction as you, even if they're 1 day sober or 30 days sober or even 24 hours. And at that time, when I heard people's stories, it just emotionally attached me. And I've never spoken of my story. This is actually will be the first time. And I've been waiting for this opportunity for a very long time. And I'm surprised that you came across, and a lot of people don't want to pick up stories. They rather brush it off. And I think recovery is an important thing, even if it's off of marijuana, alcohol, cigarettes, or anything that you choose of, maybe even food, and it's just like an addiction for me. I feel like I feel like there's a yes or no decision. So if you have drugs in front of you and you see drugs and you're mentally unstable or you feel that you have an urge to use, I mean that decision's right there. You either say yes or no. And I've been presented that time, and when the first time when I said no, when I was actually in treatment, it made me realize that I actually have the will and power to actually say no because I didn't have that power before. So when I went into this program, they these women, these 12 women that I grew with that actually are still connected to this day, and they're a family. And I wish I stayed with that family because that connection was the motherhood, and the motherhood of connection of women that actually are in the relationships of being in recovery, having their children, going through circumstances, and also, fighting the demon inside of you, I believe. And when I was in this program, my son got sick, and I ended up having another child. I was pregnant. I didn't know. So when I was at this pregnant program, when I was at the program pregnant, I was there. After 4 months, I realized I was pregnant, and that changed dramatically because it was very hard for me to realize that I will be going on 3 children, and I also have an not even a 1-year-old, and I'm pregnant. So I was taking care of, my daughter and being pregnant at the same time in this program, which I think also helped in the fact because, a lot of women there, they helped me, and that connection, like with people that are in recovery or active in recovery, active addiction, I believe that everybody has their own story. And I believe even if you're homeless or if you're rich, I believe everybody has a purpose. And I don't care if they're sleeping on the street. I have conversations with people all the time, and I cry with them. Like I literally I spread the word like of recovery because like inside of me, I feel like I have the will to spread the word. And I come from a very addictive family. So, I do have people that are sober now in my family. And it took a long time for everybody to realize that. And it comes from a lineage of lines. It's not just me. So, when I got sober at first in January 2nd, that was just the beginning. But when it really hit me was probably about 2 years ago. So when I went into that program, my son got sick, and then I could no longer take care of him at that program because of the scenario of community living. He was so sick with RSV and bronchial that he couldn't stay in a community setting. So he went with the other party. So when he went with the other party, he stayed there for about 3 months, and my daughter stayed with me at the program. And it was very hard to disconnect with a newborn baby that's 6 weeks old, sick, in a coma for 3 months. So when I was in that hospital by myself, I realized a lot about life, that, life and death is there. And, you know, life and death is there, basically. So when I was there, I wrote a book called The Path Through Addiction of an Addict, and it's on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and Google. And I published it in 2020. And I started in 2014 in my journey. This is when I started my addiction when I was 17. I got pregnant,
Well,
and I was addicted
let's
to
rewind.
drugs.
Let's rewind. So I hear an accent. You're obviously from Massachusetts. Um,
Yes. Yes.
I can hear it, and plus I lived there also for like 5 or 6 years.
Oh,
Um,
you did?
I lived in Plymouth. I lived in New Bedford. I lived in what other place did I live in? Middleborough. Mostly South Shore, but and I'm from like the Philadelphia area, so I can always pick up a Boston accent when I hear it. Plus Jamaica Plains, that gave it away when you said Jamaica Plains. And earlier when
Yeah.
we talked, you were on the train, but I believe you mean you were on the T.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
I was traveling earlier. I couldn't make it, so I wanted to make sure I was present for this because it's very important,
yeah.
I
No,
believe.
no. So let's get so you start out. You're from that area. Um, How old were you when you discovered alcohol?
Actually, I was actually 14 when I became an alcoholic. I started drinking when I was 14. I started smoking pot at 17. Um, I was more of an alcoholic, more to drain my feelings and my energies, and I couldn't deal with life at that time because I was only 14. I don't know what was going on. A lot was going on, but I started alcohol due to the fact that I had previous family members that introduced alcohol. So when I got introduced to it, I kind of watered down the vodka bottle and kind of stole it and went to parties and stuff like that. And
That was me at
it
12.
went on for about 6 years. I
Yeah,
was an alcoholic for about 6 years. I like to drink, and a lot of the times would end up in fights and arrested and stuff
yeah.
like that. So
People
I
don't
kind of try to
realize
take control of it.
people don't realize that you become an alcoholic, and it's not how much you drink, it's why you drink. And I remember, like I always say, I became an alcoholic when I was 12. It's not like I wasn't drinking every day when I was 12, but I was drinking to minimize things. I was drinking to forget. I was drinking to drown my 12-year-old troubles. And it was because
Yeah.
somebody I knew died, and it was the first time of dealing with death. And I said to my friend, if we drink, we're gonna feel better. And that's the start of me. Like I dabbled in alcohol when I was 11, but when I was 12, I was already familiar with what being drunk felt like. So when I had these bad feelings and I said, "Oh, I'm just gonna drink and I'll feel better," that's me drinking like an alcoholic at 12 years old. And it took me hammering that into some people's heads, like, listen, it's not how much, it's why. So, I can respect you being 14 and being an alcoholic. And weed, I don't really.
When you just mentioned that, you said that always a reason why or how you want to drown your feelings. And right around when I was 14 is when my grandmother passed away, and that's when it started. Now that you,
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense to me. And so if you were drinking by 14, when did you, and I don't consider marijuana, I don't consider that a drug. Um, but when did you discover like harder than weed drugs?
when I was, all right, so when I was 14, I hung out with everybody that did smoke and they drank and did other drugs, but I stayed away from the marijuana just because I didn't want to be dependent on it. I knew how a lot of people would be dependent on the marijuana to even do anything. So I kind of seen it in the process of my friends doing it. So I stayed away from it. But then when I turned 17, um, I was offered it again, and then I finally took it, and I loved the feeling of marijuana, and I became addicted since then, and I'm 29. So if you do the math from 17 to 29, other than the breaks in between the programs, yeah, I like marijuana, but it's very dependent, and you have to it's a very dependent drug. I mean marijuana for me is like an anxiety relief. Like I feel like when I smoke, my anxiety goes down. I feel mellow. I feel relaxed, and my head doesn't start going 1,000 miles per hour. And that's why I also am. I have a card, whatever the case may be. But
I have
I
a
decided
card to
the
take.
other day, huh?
I have a card too.
I decided the other day to actually give up marijuana. So I'm actually on day 3 of no marijuana, and I am shivering and I am going to the bathroom a lot, and that is reality after smoking for 2.5 years, and that would do it. And I decided this because I don't want it's a backfire in my face kind of thing. So I'm trying to do the right thing by my own self and say, you know what, Stacy, you can do it without the programs, without the shelters, without the detoxes. You can do it. So when somebody spoke to me the other day, we were speaking about Jesus, and we did a prayer, and I talked and talked, and I felt that, you know, I can open up my awareness more if I stop depending on marijuana. So I decided that I'm not going to smoke anymore, which would be great for me, and it would divine some time between,
Money.
right. So dividing between money and time consuming and all that. So I put it all together in my head. I said, you know what? I think it's time for Stacy to quit. Stacy's gonna do it. And now I'm on day 3. And I thought about it last night and I said, struggles all night. Couldn't sleep. Thought about it. It's the only thing that helps me sleep, eat, and everything. So it's like now I have to learn how to cope without the marijuana and learn how to consume my time in the right way. And, that's where I'm at with that. But when I started at 17, I was introduced to marijuana, but I was also at the time introduced to crack at the same time. And
That's quite the leap. That's quite
mm,
the. It's like, hey, do you want to try
yeah,
some,
well,
or do you want to try
well,
crack?
it's I I don't know what happened, but I know I was offered it, and the minute it happened, it came the love, let's just say. So after the first of my try, I was doing it a lot, a lot. I was living outside. I was living on the streets. I was robbing cars. I was arrested. I was in jail. I would wake up not knowing where I was, even if it's just like sleeping behind dumpsters. Like I'm not even kidding. Like and I had a place to go. I chose the streets. So when I chose the streets with one of my exes would be my father of my children, which is deceased now, but I ran amok with him, let's just say. And when I did that, I ended up pregnant. And I was pregnant and I was addicted. So at that time, I stopped on my own after I realized I was pregnant. And I continued to stay sober. And I had my child, and he was living with me for quite a while, and then a dispute happened, and then he was taken from me. So when he was taken from me, it was a heartbreak. Like it's one of those things that, like, it's like losing your sibling, your mother, your father, somebody close to you, and it hurts really bad. And when you go through something like that in life, it really takes a toll of your life, because you know that that child needs you. And when I had birth with him, they didn't take him from me, but he lived with me in Quincy for a while. And when a domestic violence situation happened, I was sent to a hospital and they admitted me. And at that time, I was in a domestic violence situation, and the child was taken. He was put up for adoption. And when he was, I got to rewind a little, because if I skip the whole part, it's not going to make sense. So when I had, his name is, his name is P. Okay, his name's P. So I had him, and they said he wasn't allowed to come back to my residence. So they said that you have to go into a program in order to get your child back, or a shelter. They didn't offer me shelter. They didn't offer me FUP Section 8 through DCF. They didn't offer me anything. They didn't give me therapy counseling. They shut me down. And I had to do this all on my own. So I had a family advocate that was working with me, and she was telling me how to get into therapy counseling and getting to a program. So it was a domestic violence program that I went into. And by law, if you're in a domestic violence situation and you have a child that was taken due to domestic violence, and you go to a domestic violence shelter, with the department's rules, they're supposed to reunite that child with you, but they didn't. So I sat at this domestic violence program for about 12 months with mothers and children, 12, same scenario, 12 adults, a bunch of children. And I fought tooth and nail. I did every group. I did everything that I could possibly do to keep myself entertained entertained with the fact that I need to get my child back, and the department wasn't pushing. So when I sat there for 12 months, I would have to go back and forth between the program to the visitations 1 hour. And I did this weekly for 12 months. Okay. And by law, they're supposed to bring you your kid, transfer over the case from where it is. They didn't do any of that. So I'm making this clear because this is on video, so everybody knows about it anyway. But the thing is that when I had P, it was like I thought my life was going to change for the better, but it didn't. It went kind of downhill. So after they said, you know, this program's shutting down, you have nowhere to go with your child. He's going up for adoption. And a lot of things happen in the court system. So I don't want to. So a lot of stuff happened. He got adopted, and they offered me 4 times a year to see him. Then I appealed the decision to have him adopted by one of my family members, and they weren't having it. And the thing is that this whole scenario with this whole case with my son P is more of a scenario where I looked into it and nothing adds up. My paperwork don't add up to their paperwork that they don't have, but I have my paperwork. So I went into court, I appealed it, and I said, listen, what is the reason why he can't come live with me? I'm sober, I'm in a stable environment. He's too comfortable where he is. And that was that. You have twice a year for 1 hour. And I said, you just offered me 4. Now that I appealed it, you bring it down to 2 for an hour. So now he's been adopted since he was 2.5. He's now 9. And I see him twice a year, still 1 hour. And there's a therapist or a lawyer in there, and they observe the visits, and they say he's very well connected with me. And that connection will never die because he knows who his mother is. That connection will always be there. And I've been fighting for the past year to get more visitations with him. And that will come into clear. The next video will go say that. But in that process of the moment, after that program that they told me was shutting down, it shut down, I left. I went back to my house. And I ended up using. I felt that I had no hope left. I felt like my kid was kidnapped from me, and I tried my hardest, and it was never recognized by the department. So I started using another drug that I never picked up before.
Which
was it was heroin and coke, and it became an addiction with the needle. So I never experienced that until I experienced that, and then you get really into the downhole hill, and that became a lot of money, a lot of anger, a lot of dispute, a lot of harm to myself in a way. And I still fight to this day. In my head, it's always going to be in the back of your head that you want to use. But in my head, I just say, you can't do that. You're going to lose everything. You're going to lose your house, and you're going to lose your kids. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose yourself, basically. So in my head right now, I'm at the standby where my awareness is opening up to the fact where I know that drugs is not going to be the cure for my emotions. I have to learn how to go through them myself and get to know my own emotions, have my panic attacks, learn how to cope with them. And a lot of the times I write poems, or I rap, or I'll write, and that's my cure. Like, I don't care if anybody doesn't like my poems. I don't care if they don't like my raps. I don't care if it doesn't make sense. I don't care if I'm stuttering or making the words dyslexic. As long as I feel that I'm okay in my heart, that I'm spreading whatever I feel is awareness and spreading the word, I feel. So I feel a lot of emotions with this addiction shit. This addiction shit has a toll on my family, and has a toll over a black cloud over everything. So I'm trying to break the curse. So I broke it. So I'm standing at 5 years now, and I do have both of my children. After that program, of the 12-month program with those in that program, I had my child. And at the end, they said that they had no housing. So I stayed there for 18 months, and they promised me housing. And then all of a sudden, the department wants to say, oh, we have these certain Section 8 things that is FUP that will give you housing. I said, wow, you couldn't give that to me 10 years ago. Now you want to give it to me? Is it a special grant? Is it like, you know? And it comes down to the fact that they gave me housing to house me and my children. But what they did was they sent me to another shelter after that program. So I lived in New Bedford. So I was in a shelter with my two children and my ex, and we stayed there for about a year. And I finally got to Boston. Now I've lived here for 2.5 years now. I have my own apartment. I have a job. I take care of my children very well. I think that I'm doing a very great job of where I'm at, and a lot of people judge me. A lot of people know me. A lot of people are going to see this video and they're not going to like it, or they will like it. But that's not the point. The point is actually speaking about it because I got the balls, so I'm going to do it for everybody. And this ain't going to be the last video either. So I'll tell you that. So,
let me
right.
get this. You have 2 kids?
Yes, I have two children that live with me and one that is adopted.
Okay, so you have 3 total. And after losing the first one, P, you relapsed.
Yes, yes.
And how long did you relapse
After the program.
after?
How long did it last? All right, so it would be 2019 I started using that heroin and cocaine, the needle, and that lasted for about a year and a half until I got pregnant again with with my daughter. And at that time when I had her, I stopped altogether with everything and I did it on my own. I got into counseling. I went to AA meetings. And I tried my hardest to stay sober. And I was living in a shelter.
You guys had
And
great recovery up there. I mean, wherever addiction was really, so I lived all over the country, and I've noticed that whenever you're in an area where addiction was really bad, you also find amazing recovery, like really good
yeah,
meetings. Where because I got sober in L.A. where there's Skid Row, and you hear it's a party city and all that kind of shit. And
yeah, Ellen's
but
lit.
but wherever there's like horrible addiction, there's also great recovery in the same place because all those addicts do eventually you either jails, institution, or death. You know what I
Yes, yeah.
mean? And those are the 3 ways unless you get out of that, which a lot of us do get out of that. And do you still go to meetings?
I go to meetings on the phone. On the phone, I do them. At my old group where I used to live, I do it on the phone.
Was you gonna say, are you collecting a 5-year chip today?
So that was the question. I need to find one tonight somewhere. I want to go get a chips. I do.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna
my
say.
next after this phone call, I think today's what Wednesday. I think there's one up the street. I'm gonna call my friend. She's gonna see if there's one. I'm gonna tell her we need to get to a meeting tonight and get a chip
Yeah, you
because
gotta click that
that's amazing. Like I looked on like I already knew. I thought it was yesterday, and it said no, that don't add up. And it's today. So I wrote a nice little thing on Facebook, and I wrote about how I felt and how I feel about where I've progressed and where I defected. And a lot of people read it, a lot of people like it, they don't like it, whatever. But a lot of people, they're judgmental on addicts, and it's like you can't really judge an addict, but you can. But I think it's rude, honestly. I think it's like have a conversation and try to enlighten them, but to sit there and put them down isn't the right way to do it. And a lot of people in this area in Boston, they're hardcore recovery people. Like there's treatment out here. There's not a lot of beds, but there is treatment. But they're trying to help the people on the Ave. They already cleared that all up. It's already cleared. So all those people, I hope they all got help and got housing from the state because all these people are sick, and whatever is going around down that way, it's tranquilizing people into zombies.
Yeah,
And not zombies, but
no,
very,
mixing fentanyl and trank.
yeah, that's what it is.
what Tranquil is. It's elephant tranquilizer. People are shooting up tranquilizer that's fit for an elephant, and they're mixing it with fentanyl, the deadliest drug on the planet. And
Yeah.
it's absolute because like I'm from the Philadelphia area where we have Kensington, the open air market. You know what I mean? Like if you're in Kensington, you're not there to hang out. You're there to stand there like a zombie, like leaned all the
Yeah.
way over, doing the
Yeah.
heroin lean. You know what I? You know what the
Yeah.
heroin lean is.
Yep.
Everyone
The
knows.
lean with it, rock with it, they
Yeah,
call it. Oh yeah.
yeah. Um. So, what are some of the things that you feel like you progressed in the last 5 years from what it was like in addiction to now?
So, oh, that's a big one. Well, from the past 5 years, from being an addict from 14 all the way till I was 26, but in between having spaces, but it's still an addict is always be an addict, I believe. And now that I hit that 5 year mark from where I started January 3rd, 2nd to now, this 5 years has been program shelters in my own housing, but I felt comfortable when I was in my own housing, and that's when I realized that this is what I need to be sober to have, and I realized that if I do anything, I'm gonna lose it all. So in reality of my addiction, I feel like it's always there. It's the adrenaline's there, but you got to learn how to focus on how to express your adrenaline somewhere else, because that emotions where people that are around you in an area where you feel that you might be in harm of relapsing. It's very hard to watch other people around you hurt themselves, and I try to encourage a lot of people. And I've been going to AA meetings. I have attended in-person AA meetings the past 5 years, but I do it online now. But I think it would be better to do it in person so you can hear more of the stories and feel the emotions and the reactions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I try to keep myself sober today. Basically, I just try to talk. My only coping is talking, writing, and music. And when I think about drugs, if I want to use, I'll play a depressing song. I'll sit there. I'll put the instrumental on of that song, and I'll write and I'll make music, even if it don't make sense. And I'll write those feelings out, because if I don't, then I'm overwhelmed in my own head about what if I do this? What if I do that? It's okay to do this. It's not okay to do that. Or maybe I can get away with this and get away with that. But there's no getting away with it, because you're cheating your own self and in your own denial. Like if you think you're gonna slip up and then like slip back in, I mean that's a relapse and you can always come back from that. But if you're doing it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then you're not realizing it until death do us part kind of thing, and you know, death is there. Like this is gonna kill everybody. Anybody who does drugs, God bless their soul. I'm not going to speak like that, but they do decease, because addiction is addiction, and anything that they're putting in there is ODing everybody, and it's killing people off, and that's what they want.
Can
The,
I ask, is that how your ex passed away?
yes, he OD'd. Yes, he actually was in Pennsylvania when that happened.
Oh, what part of Pennsylvania? 'Cause that's where I live.
I have no idea. I
Was
don't
it
know.
rehab?
Huh?
Was it a
No,
rehab?
he wasn't in rehab. He lived down there with his new girlfriend that had a family with. So in between that, a whole line of discretion. I had a baby, and then I didn't know the other girl was pregnant, kind of thing. So that happened to me, and that kind of twisted me all out because I didn't know. And I lost my kid, and then he had another baby, and it just really messed me up in the head too at that time. So that would be in between the time when 2014 2015, but he died 2 years ago. So he died from an overdose. He was very sick, and his heart wasn't up to date. So when he did it, he OD'd. His heart exploded, and it was very hard to tell his son that.
I'm sorry to yeah, I mean, it's never easy to like have to there's no like song you can listen to or book you can read or whatever for you to be able to get that like strength to be able to say those words out loud. And like, because I have an ex who passed away and she was bipolar and she killed herself. And yeah, and that was about 8 years, a little more than 8 years ago. And it doesn't get any easier, but it does get easier to cope with and live with, as opposed to it affecting you in a negative way, to whereas it's going to make me spiral and go drink or go use again. I don't have to, like, for the first 4 or 5 years of mourning her death, I was drinking or using in spite of that. Like, oh, this is my reason. This is why I can't get away with drinking or using, is because she's not here anymore, and that's not fair. And now I can stay sober and be like, she's not here, that's unfair, but there's nothing I can literally do about it. There's no drink I can drink, nothing I can do. There's no pill I can snort that's going to bring her back. So
Right.
why am I going to drink or use in spite anymore? And I feel like that's something that you learn over time. Because 1 year sober, JD, still didn't know how to deal with it. I was,
Right. Yeah.
and it still took me a lot of work to be able to get to the point where I can actually live with it without it affecting me negatively.
Yep. And that was another thing because I feel like grieving, there's no exclamation when it ends, you know? It just goes until, but you learn how to cope with it, like you said, but it hurts on the inside. But over time, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I just lost my sister 2 weeks ago. So I'm mourning right now. I'm grieving. I'm having
Sorry to hear that.
I'm 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 having it. So right now I know that addiction can take lives. So at this point, when my sister passed away, I had to see her in a casket and it was very hard. And I have 5 sisters that are addicted and they're sober now. But when I express the fact of people that do drugs and think there's no effect to it, there is. Because there is life out there that you can enjoy. And if you don't enjoy it the right way, you're going to end up 6 feet under. And that's the end of it. And it's a long journey for a lot of people. I pray for all of them, all the sick people. I call them sick people because they are sick and they need help, and it's very hard to discuss that to addicts that want to use and they don't know how to cope with their feelings and they don't know where to go. They're either homeless or they have somewhere to go, and they're not opening their eyes and seeing what they really have. And when you don't realize that, it's hard to go through that addiction struggle because you have nobody except the people that are sick, and then you hang out with the sick people and you become more sick. And losing my sister, I mean, she
Was was that
she
through
said
addiction?
she said if you hit your 5 year mark, I'll give you $500. I said it's not about that, baby. I said I need you to make it through. And that was right before she died. And I'm trying to cope with it. I'm working with my therapist. I'm doing the best I can. I'm writing. I'm doing what I have to do in order to keep myself sane. And I
Was
don't
that
care what
important?
anybody thinks, because that's the only reason. And that's another reason, you know, seeing somebody that you love so close that is like your mom or your sister, and it hurts. It hurts. And drug addiction, like that serenity prayer. And I
Was that
have this
so?
queen.
Was that also from she overdosed?
We're still waiting for an autopsy. It's under investigation, but as far as I know, I mean, there was nothing around her. That's all we know.
Yeah.
But we know that
How
it
was your
could have
you
been.
you have five sisters?
Yeah, I have five sisters.
So
Yeah,
you're
and
one of six, or do you have any brothers too?
I'm one of six, but I don't have brothers. I have sisters.
Where do you fall in that six? Oldest, youngest, in the middle?
I'm the second youngest. So I have
You're
a little sister and I protect her because she's my little one. All
how much of an age gap do you have from your baby sister to your oldest sister?
right, so we got she's 24, my youngest. I'm 29. We got 36 or 38, and then 34, and then my sister is 31. So there's about 2 or 3 years gap in between, but me, yeah, a couple years in between. Yeah. But
Yeah.
my mom, we had a growing up. We had a house. We had everything. But we had friends. It was great. It was great growing up. I mean, there was addiction, but like, I mean, other than that, of the addiction part, it was a nice home to grow up in. I mean, when things spiral, you can't really control other people's actions.
Did
But
you grow up in a
I know,
house where your parents were together?
yes, my mom and dad were together for 26 years. My dad just passed away 2 years ago from cirrhosis in the liver. He was an alcoholic.
A
So,
functioning alcoholic?
yeah, he was a functional alcoholic. He worked and he was a military marine, and he worked and he did what he had to do in support for his family. And he did a great job at that, but he was an alcoholic, but he was more of a stave to himself alcoholic. So he wasn't like, yeah, but
Yeah, no, I know the difference. I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of people out there in that age range where they die an alcoholic because they weren't ever drinking to the point where they lost their job or lost their family or lost,
right,
their driving privileges. Some people just drink at home and they have a bunch of beers every night. And, who's to say that one person's alcoholic or not? Everybody has their own journey. Everyone, you know what I mean? Everyone has their whatever. But that's what happens with alcohol is it starts breaking down the insides of your body. And people don't realize that don't, understand what alcoholism actually is.
right. So, like, he struggled it for 5 years, the cirrhosis, and he became very weak, and dementia sat in, and it would go back and forth in between phases, awakenness, and then into coma status. So it was a very long road, and he wanted to die in a new home, so they moved, and he did die where he wanted to, not where he wanted to, but it was a hospital. But we were there for him and we stayed by his side. And, it was hard for the whole family because growing up with both of your parents and then losing one, it's hard. And then now, 2 years later, lose my sister before Christmas is even harder.
Yeah.
And I've
I,
only lost four close people to me, which would be my grandmother, my dad, my sister, and P. So it's just hard to grieve. I don't know how to grieve because it's been so long in between periods. Like
yeah.
with my father, I didn't I just didn't know how to grieve. Like, and now with my sister, I'm talking about it. It's very hard to talk about, but I like talking about it, but it makes me tear up because it's death.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. My dad just passed away in June. And
I'm sorry.
so to get through it sober and to actually grieve in the moment. Like I said, I've been grieving my ex since 2015. I've learned how to grieve by now with her, but learning how to grieve from my father, who was with my mom for 40 years, um,
Wow.
I'm still grieving, his death. I'm still mourning his death 6 months later.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't get any easier, but you learn to live with it more eventually. Um, the phone calls, you know what I mean? Like whenever I go to call him to tell him something, you know what I mean? I can't call him anymore. I mean, I can.
Yeah.
Mom hasn't turned off his phone. I can call him and hear his voice on his voicemail if I really want. Um, so I've done that a bunch of times. uh,
Yeah, we do the same thing. We'll call my we have recordings of both of their voices, and sometimes we'll listen to it, and it helps. It does help just to hear their voice, but you know they're listening. If you talk out loud, they're here.
yep.
That's how I feel. I talk out loud all the time, and I prayed today again out loud, and I said, "I love you, Kay. I'll always be here. Put me in the right direction. Make sure I'm healthy. Make sure my kids are safe, and watch over our family." And that's the best I can do, and that's the only way I can speak is out loud.
Yeah, and you're doing the right things. You're in therapy and you're talking to your counselor, and you're doing all. Today, I get a double whammy every Well, not every Wednesday. Every Wednesday I have therapy. Then every 3 or 4 Wednesdays I have psychiatry too. So like today was psychiatry and therapy, which is a ton of healing.
Yeah,
Back to back in a day. But it's the way that I have it set up is specifically on Wednesdays. So,
yeah.
and it's like my middle of the week kind of check in, and you know what I mean? It's
It
getting through.
makes you feel better when you have somebody to talk to and express, and they can give you options, and they don't really judge, but they'll give you opinions and how to cope with different things. And my therapist is great. I mean, we'll talk and talk and talk for hours, but we got to shut down at one point after an hour. But she's real good. She helps me, and I don't have a lot. I have my family to talk to. I have friends, but when you want to talk about certain things, it's better to be open.
Um, so how do you think your recovery, like, what are you doing today that's going to be helping your recovery for next year?
All right, so this whole year is going to be great, I think. I have this big plan, and with my plan for recovery this year is I'm taking my book, and I am part of an organization called Power, and I am going to be publishing my book with who's people professionals of New York. Um, and they're going to dispute my book. But what I want to do is be a public speaker about addiction and recovery and the journeys of how what I went through and my whole story and stuff like that,
And if
which
you
is written in the book
send
Pathway.
me the link, send me the link to your book because I'll put the link, whether you're watching or whether you're listening. If you go into the bio of this episode, I'll attach the link that goes directly to her book on Amazon.
Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be great because I have been posting it, and I got a lot of bad reflex, but I didn't take the discourage to a point in my head because it's my story. You shouldn't have any opinion on it. You should feel and you should respect, right? So when I wrote this book is very gritty and very open about how I felt and what I went through because it was like a journal, like Anne Frank. I went into detox. I said if J.K. Rowling could write a book in a car, become fucking famous. I could sit in a detox and write a book and become fucking famous eventually. So it's not about being famous. It's about spreading the awareness of everything that people don't want to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about rape. They don't want to talk about how they shot up. They don't want to talk about what they did for drugs. And it's like it's all reality. Like it comes with death, institution, and jail, like you said, but it also comes with what you do to retain what you want, and it's not the right way to live life, I think. So my recovery speaking this year, I'm hoping that I become a public speaker, and I know that there's an opening at AA meetings, and they videotape it, and you can tell your story. I want to get to some AA meetings this month. I want to start speaking at the AA meetings. That's my goal. And I also want to just spread how everything is in life. And I think AA meetings in person would be more beneficial for me, so I can stand up and people can hear my story. And I've never done it. And I'm very nervous to do it.
So
And
you weren't even big on like sharing like before, because like I got
no, I listened. I was a listener. I put my hand up, but I would say, everybody have a blessed day. But I never really shared anything. I just listened and like took everything in that they were saying. And it was a good group. I mean, this group was amazing. Like, they were old people, young people, but mostly elderly. And they would have sessions, like group sessions. I would speak in the group session a little bit, but I wasn't really open. So this year I want to open up with my voice, because I've been hiding, let's say, my voice, and I want to be able to. I don't know how to start it. I'm gonna work on it. I'm gonna connect with people somehow, some way, like you, and you're connecting with everybody, so you know exactly what you're doing, and I want to do the same thing. It's just I got to learn what sources are there to help to do that.
yeah, and I think that's going to help you a lot speaking in the AA meetings, because sometimes not even being like the first time I was the speaker at a speaker meeting, I was 30 days sober. And but I was raising my hand and speaking at every single meeting that could let you share. And I was doing that from day one, because like I did stand up comedy. The only way I know how to heal is by talking.
Yeah.
So AA is definitely a great way to spread your message and to talk and spread a little like strength and hope, experience strength and hope. You know what I mean? I think,
Yeah.
and you'll find, after the meeting, and somebody comes to you and say, "I really like what you shared today," and then you can talk about what you shared and why it made you feel the way it felt or whatever. But I think sharing in meetings and not just being a listener, sharing is almost more beneficial than listening, because people tell you what they were listening to you about, or hey, you said this, but I have a theory on that, and you can keep your ears open and hear some another way of living, because you're speaking more. People want to talk to the people that are speaking.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that I think that would be a good goal. And then my second goal would be, you know, trying to figure out where I want to go in life, which would be like which direction I'm taking, either like I don't know at this point. I'm at a standby. I just wanna go step by step, day by day, but I'm doing the best I can, and with my sister's thing. But the next thing of recovery, it's like I know I can do this. I'm gonna stay sober for myself, and for whatever reactions of the past that will help me cope with my dealings. And this year, I want to awaken, and I want to speak. And this tonight, if I go to an AA meeting tonight, I'm bringing my children. I will speak. Actually, that will be one of my goals tonight. Now that you, now that you convinced me, I'll do it. And if I do it, I'm gonna record it and I'll send it to you.
You don't have to.
But
It'll be good just for you to just talk. It'll make you feel better. People
yeah,
listen, and even if it's for 3 minutes, those are three long minutes where you can talk for and get some feelings out.
yeah. And then I'll be able to connect with some people too at the end. That's the best thing, because there is connection there in that room. And I know that, and I was just very nervous at that time when I was going. I just wanted to see what was going on, and I never really been to AA meetings until then. Well, my sister, when I was 14, when I first drank, she brought me to an AA meeting at the courthouse, and this lady told her story, and I'm just breaking down crying. I'm like, oh my god, and I just couldn't take it. I had to leave the courtroom, and she was trying to show me the awareness of what happens when you do addiction or drugs or something like that. And at that time, people were addicted, so they wanted to show, this isn't the ropes, this isn't the way you're living. You have to do something different with your life. Don't follow footsteps and do the right thing. And it's either this way or that way, I think. So I'm going this way in the right path, and I don't want to go back. So my 5 years, I'm hoping I can celebrate my next 5 years in 5 years. My 10 years. I
Yeah,
want I want to be able to make it and not be the ones that didn't make it.
yeah, and you're doing all the right things. I mean, you're sharing about it now. As I know it's not easy to talk about some of the things you've been through. And there's a lot of shame and guilt that goes along with being an addict. And I know I felt a lot of shame and guilt, you know what I mean? So I know that I'm not
Yeah.
alone in how I felt. We did what we had to do to get drugs, back then. And they're not like our best moments, but still those moments kind of brought you to where you are today. And
Right. Learning process.
yeah, and we all learn at our own rates. And some of us are dyslexic when we read it, you know what I mean? Like, and it is what it is. You learn it when you learn it. And I'm just glad you came on here, and I'm your first one that you got to share your story with. And
Yes, actually. Yeah.
like I said, if you want to read her book, then just go into the bio and you'll be able to click the link, go straight to it.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
I appreciate you having the time and day to actually hear my story, and I'd like to have a conversation with you. And I think that was the best conversation I've had in a while because I think I needed this even to grieve or moan. I think this story needs to be said. And that's why I took your offer. At first, I was iffy about it because iffiness. But I think if I can speak once about it, I can speak again about it.
I think you're gonna feel a lot more empowered now when you go to AA and you're like, I want to talk. Not like,
Yeah,
and it's, you need to talk. It's not like you want to talk. Your soul needs you to talk in order for you to mourn more.
right. Yeah,
So keep me posted on how that goes.
I will. I appreciate your time and day, and I will talk
No,
to you
no problem.
soon.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.